Welcome back to Transcriber from Reddit. As promised, this is part 3 of the read-through of the blog post, 2 WELS pastors and 4 meritless lawsuits. In part 3, it is going to cover the August 30th court hearing that was held back in 2013. And like before, my commentary will be held after my read-through of this section. Part 3. The August 30th Court Hearing. Under oath, Pastor Glendy testified that Jonathan's behavior served no legitimate purpose because it hindered the ministry of St. Peter and the corps, and it was just an attack. Parentheses, court transcript, page 40, end parentheses. According to Pastor Glendy, Jonathan's behavior served no legitimate purpose because the decision about whether Skorczewski would serve as a pastor was made back in January and April. Pastor Glendy stated this numerous times throughout his testimony. Below is just one example. Under oath, Pastor Glendy said that Jonathan's, quote, behavior was disruptive in our congregation in a meeting. It attacks me personally, end quote. Attorney Maurer, spelled M-A-U-R-E-R, then asked Glendy, quote, what's wrong with that, Pastor? What's wrong with a person attacking on how you handled the situation of allegations of sexual harassment by one of your pastors? What's wrong with that? End quote. To which Pastor Glendy responded, quote, a group of my peers have said it's been dealt with, addressed, move on, end quote. Parentheses, court transcript, page 39, end parentheses. In summarizing all of the evidence presented by Pastor Glendy, Pastor Glendy's attorney said, quote, there are statements that have been provided as evidence that, show that Mr. Donnan is not going to let this issue die. He believes his purpose is to see this through. The issue has absolutely been resolved, and for some reason, Mr. Donnan refuses to come to grips with that. So his conduct in sending the letters, continuing to contact people, showing up at the church and refusing to leave, clearly, in my opinion, engages in a course of conduct that has no legitimate purpose. End quote. Court transcript, page 75. Was the issue of Skorczewski's CRM status absolutely resolved? No. This court hearing took place during the 30-day comment period in which members of St. Peter and the corps were being asked to advise the district about Skorczewski's CRM status, and only a few months later, the district granted Skorczewski CRM status. He immediately received a call and has already been installed as a WELS pastor in Texas. Attorney Maurer tried to get Pastor Glendy to admit that the August 13th meeting was about potentially reinstating Skorczewski to the pastoral office. Attorney Maurer questioning Pastor Glendy, quote, this is the section where Maurer is asking the questions and Pastor Glendy is responding. Asked, okay, you testified earlier that the issue in the past had been resolved back in January, correct? Glendy responds, there was an initial decision reached on it in January. Attorney asks, he resigned in April? Glendy responds, correct. Attorney asks, and you're stating that the August 13th, 2013 meeting had nothing to do with that whatsoever, with his disposition going forward with the church, correct? Glendy responds, Pastor Ski resigned and is not currently a pastor. He doesn't have status to be a pastor. The church has nothing to do with him going forward as a pastor. Attorney asks, that's not entirely true, is it? Isn't it a fact that part of the purpose of this meeting was some specific members of the congregation wanted to reinstate the pastor to his previous position? Correct? Grundy responds, that's not true. Attorney asks, if I have people come in and testify that there were people at that meeting that were petitioning the church to reinstate the pastor, that's not the truth, they're lying? Pastor Grundy responds, were there people there that their opinion was that the pastor should be reinstated? Yes. Attorney asks, were there people at the meeting that said that? Grundy responds, there could have been people in the meeting that said that. The purpose of the meeting, however, was not to reinstate him. Attorney asks, the purpose of the meeting was as it related to Jonathan's wife, correct? Grundy responds, to share information regarding the case. Attorney asks, so why would you think it's inappropriate for the husband of the alleged victim to be present at the meeting to hear this? Grundy responds, Mr. Donnan has heard all that information before, and from my knowledge, it was a meeting for the members of our congregation, which he is not one of. Attorney asks, why didn't you simply tell him to leave in the beginning? Instead, you gave him the opportunity to speak. Grundy responds, I didn't see him there at the beginning. I was up in the front. I had not had a chance to do anything about it, and I didn't want to cause a scene to ask him to leave. For 2 hours of the meeting, Jonathan sat there. From my position, he looked agitated and upset when different things were said, which, as I have always said, Jonathan is entitled to his opinion in regards to this case. Attorney asks, wouldn't you be upset if you believed your wife was the victim of sexual harassment by a pastor and they were discussing that at a meeting? Do you think that's unreasonable? Grundy responds, I guess I don't know how to answer that question. Court transcript, pages 35 to 37. Attorney Moorer further questioning Pastor Grundy. Again, attorney asks, do you believe there was any merit to the allegations against the pastor? Grundy responds, do I believe it was sexual harassment? Attorney asks, do you believe there was any merit to any of the allegations, factual allegations, alleged against the pastor? Grundy responds, the pastor resigned. Attorney asks, that's not an answer to my question. Do you believe there was any factual basis for the allegations of harassment made by Jonathan's wife towards the pastor? Grundy responds, we have said, declared publicly, that lapses in judgment happened. Attorney asks, I'm just yes or no, you personally? Attorney Gill, objection to the relevance, Your Honor. Attorney Moorer, it's part of a harassment injunction, conduct that does not serve a legitimate purpose. Making up allegations of harassment just to attack these people, then that doesn't serve a legitimate purpose. Attorney Gill, Your Honor, the continued behavior has no legitimate purpose. The court, the objection is overruled. He can answer. Witness, in parentheses, Pastor Grundy. Can you repeat the question? Attorney Moorer asks, I'm asking if you personally believe there was any merit to the factual allegations of harassment raised by Jonathan's wife against the pastor. Grundy responds, are you asking me if there were... ends his sentence. Attorney says, just yes or no. Glendy responds, you're asking me a yes or no to, there's another dash, I can't agree with, dash dash. Attorney asks, so you don't believe there was any merit to the factual allegations of harassment? Attorney Gill, I'm going to object. There were 8 or 9 allegations, Your Honor. Attorney Moorer, I'm asking about any of them. Attorney Gill, what specific allegations are we talking about, Your Honor? The court, overruled, he can answer. In parentheses, Attorney Moorer questioning Pastor Glendy, end parentheses. Attorney Moorer asks, to any of them in general, yes? Glendy responds, sure, yes. Attorney asks, okay, so would you personally condone that type of conduct by one of your pastors? Glendy responds, no. Attorney asks, okay, so you believe that there were indiscretions by the pastor directly towards Jonathan's wife that occurred by the pastor, correct? Glendy responds, yes, which were addressed. And then, once he resigned, it was over because he is no longer a pastor. That happened in the middle of April. Attorney asks, okay, but again, the August 13th meeting was to address possibly the allegations that had happened in the past. Glendy responds, it was to share the summary of everything that had gone on from the end of October, November to that point. Attorney asks, what precipitated that meeting? Glendy responds, because of the letter that Jonathan and Mara sent out. Our district president said it was appropriate at this time to set it out. Until that point, we had not shared publicly with anyone in our congregation that this involved Jonathan or Mara. Attorney asks, your superiors told you, let's have a meeting with the congregation on this to let everyone know what happened, and it's your position you didn't want him and his wife to be there? Glendy responds, he wasn't a member, he was an uninvited guest. Attorney says, okay. Glendy responds, wanted or not wanted, I wouldn't have thought of inviting him. He wasn't a member. Dash. Court transcript, pages 40 to 43. Also at issue during the hearing was whether the August 13th meeting at the core was about how Pastor Skorzewski treated Jonathan's wife, and Pastor Glendy admitted that was true. After Pastor Glendy finished presenting all his evidence, and before the defense called a single witness, the court ruled on the case. The standard the court used was this, : it put the best construction on everything Pastor Glendy and his witnesses said. It considered Pastor Glendy's case in the kindest possible light, and gave Pastor Glendy the benefit of the doubt on everything. Nonetheless, the court ruled that Pastor Glendy's case had no merit, and dismissed his case. Pastor Glendy's case was dismissed even before the defense called a single witness or presented any evidence. Glendy had nothing. Commentary begins here. First off, I want to start off by answering probably the first and most obvious question on everybody's minds. Is the court transcript quoted word for word from the original? My answer is generally yes. There were parts where the author of the blog post put in ellipses or otherwise denoted that he had cut out certain sections of what had originally been said, but those are just that, sections of what had been said. Everything that the blogger put in his blog is word for word accurate, minus the sections that I believe, personal opinion, he felt added too much verbiage to what was already being said. A possible follow-up question would be, what do you mean by too much verbiage? My response would be is that this is an 80-page document of a court case in 2013 that is merely the prosecutorial side of the case. 80 pages, that is 80 pages of just the prosecution presenting their side of the case and cross-examination by the defense attorney. As previously stated, this case was thrown out of court because the prosecution did not establish their case. Glendy had nothing in 2013, and he has even more of nothing looking back on it now in 2022. I could hear people still saying, though, well, considering that the whole purpose of the hearing was regarding harassment, surely Jonathan must have made Glendy feel endangered at some point. That is a negative. Glendy's only concern, regardless if you read just the blog post or read the court's transcript as well, Glendy reiterated time and time again that the only reasons that Jonathan was not and should not have tried to present his case is because he has no legitimate purpose. Why does he have no legitimate purpose? Because it hinders the Corps and overall the WELS' ministry. Also, because Ski had resigned back in April, but conveniently ignoring that what was also being discussed was an August 13th meeting about Ski's CRM status and whether or not Ski would be granted back his pastoral ministry, whether that would be at the Corps or another church. Also, isn't it rather funny that when Attorney Moore was asking him what is wrong with Jonathan being there and talking about what had happened, Glendy's response was, well, a group of my peers have said it's been dealt with, addressed, move on. Yes, sure, we could move on if it wasn't for the fact that a pastor had resigned because the allegations against him of engaging in sexual harassment of an employee just happened to be accurate enough that a resignation had to happen. If the resignation hadn't happened, Ski wouldn't have applied for CRM status. And if it wasn't for the fact that he was applying for CRM status to become a pastor again, the victims wouldn't have felt the need to be so concerned. As to the truth of these allegations, Glendy would not answer yes or no regarding the truthfulness of the allegations, which leads me to believe that there was some truth to them. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this much waffling over what should have been an easy-to-answer question. Final point. Attorney Moore is trying to get Glendy to admit that August 13th meeting was, in fact, dealing with Ski potentially becoming a pastor again. And Glendy also does a great job waffling and evading in his response to the attorney. Him being vocal about how Jonathan shouldn't have been present because he was no longer a member is deeply concerning. If you are a victim of a pastor or any other church leader and you switch denominations but want to continue to let people know what had happened to you at the hands of said, quote, spiritual leader, unquote, you are going to be stopped and potentially have charges filed against you just because you're not a member and therefore you don't matter. And that concludes today's video. Please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment down below, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.